Welcome. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. The thing I love most about Common Time is that we're a global platform. But the one bad thing is it makes the greetings and the salutations kind of hard, but it's a good problem to have. Welcome. My name is Michael Skillern, once again. I am the Education and Outreach Coordinator with Common Time Online, and today I am here to share with you some information about Common Time and the UK curriculum. More specifically, the IGCSE, so those last 2 years there, or the GCSE if you're actually in the UK. Today I'm going to, and I didn't say this earlier, but this is a repurposing of our Wisdom Wednesday webinar series that aired live this past Wednesday on, what day was that? On November the 3rd. We are repurposing that video now for our blog and for YouTube. So what we're going to talk about today is a little bit of some announcements for our Common Time family, an introduction to Common Time, however brief, a short intro to the IGCSE. This Wisdom Wednesday is geared towards supporting educators who teach in that curriculum. So whether you're new to the IGCSE and you're trying to figure out the best ways to make it work for you, whether you're a veteran IGCSE teacher looking to innovate your plans and the way you implement the curriculum, this is for you. So first off, take a second. I always like to start off with a brief intro to what is Common Time. Common Time is your all-inclusive, purpose-built home for the arts. Through our roster of artists, through our educator community, through our member arts organizations, and through the individuals that are using our platform every day to book sessions with world-class, engaging artists, we have really built an artistic community here. We've built an artistic community where educators like yourselves can schedule, book, pay, and host video conferencing with world-class teaching artists from around the globe, bringing them into their classrooms on demand right here with our purpose-built video conferencing platform. We are in the business of empowering artists by allowing them to use our platform to host virtual events, concerts, recitals, by giving them the opportunity to give master classes, group lessons, private lessons at schools around the globe where access to the arts is not as easy as going to the supermarket like it was for me coming from Atlanta, Georgia in the U.S. And we want to help arts organizations expand their outreach by creating a digital home for them to host their live streaming and pre-recorded content where our built-in audience of individuals, educators, and artists will be looking, purchasing, and viewing all of that content. Once again, we have created a digital community of sorts that works to engage learners, empower artists, and expand outreach through these type of live, engaging virtual sessions with people from around the globe. So, if you would like to join Common Time as an educator, please head to commontime.online, hit the sign up button, which will be located right up there. Fill out the form, and then you're there. Once you complete that registration, you will be able to select from our roster of artists, and surprise, surprise, we are currently matchmaking educators with artists. So once you register, myself and the rest of the team will look through your information, kind of see what your needs are, what subjects, what disciplines you're teaching. Likewise, Common Time covers theater, visual art, music, and dance. And we will match you to one of our vetted artists. We vet all of these artists, ensuring their safety with students and ensuring the quality of the product that they're going to deliver. And once we match you to your artist, you will receive a 30-minute session at no cost to you, the educator. At no cost to you, the educator. So once again, commontime.online, sign up. Okay, let's get into the nuts and bolts of what this is about. Today we're talking about the IGCSE. I'm going to give you a brief overview, then I'm going to break it down for you. and explain to you how Common Time can support you and support your students who are on this learning journey. So first of all, what's the IGCSE? If you already know what this is, just skip ahead. This is for the newbies. This is for the new people that are learning about this education system, maybe for some of the new educators that are new to the UK curriculum. It's the General Certificate of Secondary Education. This is essentially a high school diploma. It's a 2-year program that ends with an exam. For the music portion, which we're going to be talking about today, we're going to be talking about how Common Time, and I'll be redoing this webinar and focusing on visual art, focusing on drama as well, but today we're talking about music. And the music portion of this is part exam and part portfolio. You have to submit a listening exam, which will be multiple choice and short answer questions based on prepared Western scores and recordings, and then unprepared Western scores and recordings, and a world music element that will also be unprepared. The IGCSE is offered internationally. Oftentimes you will see in non-Western countries, they will offer the IGCSE. The students will complete that, and then they will go to Europe or maybe the US to go to college. Likewise, there's a lot of American system schools where students will receive that high school diploma to go to college in the US. German system schools, so students can go to college in Germany. Then you have international baccalaureate schools where students can take that diploma a lot of places. And likewise, a lot of places accept the IGCSE as well. You know, I was thinking it's not really fair. I remember speaking with a guidance counselor at a school in China, and he was talking about how Western universities oftentimes won't accept the Chinese diploma unless you pay this extreme fee for what they call like degree equivalency, where essentially you pay X amount of dollars to a university, and then that university takes your transcript and they somehow authenticate whether or not the geometry class you said you took is the same geometry class that they want you to take, even though geometry has been the same since Egypt, right? Like, or even before that, wasn't geometry a Greek thing? I don't know. I personally don't think it's fair. I don't think there's people out there giving away high school diplomas, but maybe they are, and who am I to say otherwise? But that's why they've invented these international curricula that are kind of accepted. It's like IGCSE is like a MasterCard or a Visa in a sense. There's 3 parts of the IGCSE, and we're going to go through them one by one. We're going to go through them one by one to let you know how Common Time can support. So the first part of the IGCSE exam is the listening part. This is a crucial part of the curriculum. Likewise, this is the only portion of the curriculum that has a written exam. It's short answer and multiple choice, and it consists of excerpts from 2 Western works. Now, when we say Western, we mean Western canon music. So we're talking Mozart, Beethoven here, and the time period of these works can be Baroque, Classical, Romantic, or 20th century. One of the works that you will be asked questions about is going to be Prepared. I think for next year, it's either going to be the Brandenburg Concerto No. 4 or Haydn Symphony No. 100. So ideally in your classes, you would teach both of those pieces. You would teach knowledge of the time period and the musical era. You would teach the structure of the piece. You would teach about the symphony or about the concerto or about sonata allegro form. You would, whatever the piece requires, that's what you would teach. Then there will be the theory aspect. You would be asked to outline a melody. You would be asked to outline the form. You would be asked to know a harmonic analysis of the piece. You will also need to be able to identify and know the instrument. So for example, Haydn Symphony No. 100 is a classical symphony, so you'll need to know that there's going to be a violin 1, violin 2, there's going to be cello parts, there's going to be an oboe, there's going to be flutes, there might be timpani. You're going to need to be able to recognize things like that. There's going to be bassoon. They may even ask you for some terminology, like if they're saying fagotti, they might want you to know that that's bassoon, etc., etc., etc. Likewise, you're going to be able to need to regurgitate that same information for an unprepared piece. So they might throw in a Bach fugue, or they might throw in a piano sonata, or something of that nature, where you're going to also be asked to identify the time period. Maybe it's got heavy chromaticism. You're going to need to know that that's romantic. You're going to also need to identify the form, identify the harmonic structure, identify melodies, things like that, da 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 da. And the way Common Time can support this is that you can bring a guest artist into your class that can give your students a different perspective. I often find with curricula like this, where they're literally telling you, we can take a piece of music from any time period from what, 1400 to 1996 and ask you questions about it? That's wild. That's crazy. It almost seems impossible to even cover that much music and that many composers. So the way that I think is the best way to prepare your students, especially for the unprepared portions of the listening exam, and when they do the listening exam, they're going to have a CD. The educator yourself will play and proctor, where they'll be able to hear the recording of the piece, and they're also going to have excerpts of the score. So there's like an oral skills element where they're going to need to be able to hear certain things, and there's also the theoretical element where they're going to need to see things in the score. What Common Time can do for you is, as a Common Time member educator, you can actually bring in a guest artist to your classes to help kind of fill in some of the gaps of their learning. I think that it's so important when you're covering that much material to provide a face, a name, and an experience to these different time periods or these different composers. Your students need to be able to call on something when they're met with this assessment. And the best way that Common Time can help you achieve that is by providing you with a face and a name to really enrich those experiences. Here's some of the artists on Common Time that are available today for you to book, schedule, pay, and host video conferencing just like this, and bring into your classes to really give your students the experience that they need for the listening part of the IGCSE curriculum. The first person listed here was Jimmy Chang. Jimmy Chang is currently the choir master and conductor with the Vienna Boys Choir. I actually saw them in Columbus, Georgia, many, many moons ago. Other than that, he is a classical pianist and orchestral conductor as well. So when he comes into your class to talk about score study, when he comes into your class to workshop through Beethoven and Mozart or Tchaikovsky scores, when he comes into your class to do a score analysis on that Haydn Symphony No. 100 or that Brandenburg Concerto, he's teaching your students how to score study like a conductor. Why is this important? Because conductors are the ultimate marriage of that oral skills element where they've got to hear what the theoretical element is telling them. And that's exactly what we're asking our students to do when they sit for this exam. Likewise, why do you want to score study like a conductor? Jimmy will tell you he's been called in before on a Wednesday for a concert on a Friday because so-and-so wasn't available. This and this happened, COVID, people couldn't travel, he has to fill in. So if anyone is going to tell you how to analyze an unprepared score, it's going to be a working conductor. Your students should not be scared when they see that random score in front of them when they sit for that exam. Get Jimmy Chang in there to teach them how to score study like a conductor. How to Score Study Like a Conductor, where he can take the theoretical elements from the score and connect that to the aural sound elements that he's hearing from the orchestra or from the choir or from the piano. And once again, the other overarching benefit of bringing in a guest artist is that when you're covering that much music over that range of time, or when you're required to know a score so in depth, you need to give your students the opportunity to put a face and a name and, importantly, an experience tied behind those learning objectives. And Jimmy Chang can get in there and teach your students how to score study like a conductor. Given his piano skills, he can take that Haydn symphony, pull out a piano reduction, and actually workshop through it with your students, giving them a super hands-on approach, going section by section, outlining harmonies, tickling the ivories, and outlining those melodies, giving your students an unforgettable experience. And experiences like that with Jimmy are available right now once you sign up as an educator on the commentime.online. Sign up button in the top right. Become an educator. You can go in under the artist tab, see his artist profile, check his availability, schedule him, and pay him right here through the system using your debit card or bank account. And I think also you can use PayPal. So like I said, Jimmy would be able to support you given his background and his current working repertoire, I think, with Baroque, classical, and romantic works. But I think what gets overlooked oftentimes are the 20th century works. And that's exactly why I bring to you a composer. So the first option I gave to you was to teach your students how to score study and how to listen like a conductor. Here's the next thing you can do. I almost said second best, but there's no number twos at Common Time. Everyone's number one. I want to talk to you about Michael Standard. Michael Standard is actually a personal friend of mine, and he is a 20th century composer working right now, composing mostly chamber music. He is also a music theory expert and a great percussionist. Bringing in a composer, especially a current composer, number one, is going to give your students insight and workshop opportunities with 20th century music. They're going to be able to break down pitch sets in the way that Weber composed. They're going to be able to break down how composers were able to use pointillism or how Stockhausen was so innovative. They're going to be able to break down these things in a more personal way that your textbook cannot do. They're going to be able to show you exactly why the rhythmic works of Steve Reich were important and exactly how he used rhythmic modulation to transition through his music in a way that composers before him had not done. Michael Standard is an expert at helping your students analyze 20th century music from the eyes of a composer. Oftentimes when we're doing music theory, it's so scientific. It almost becomes math. It becomes math, especially 20th century music when you talk about using a matrix. It almost looks like statistics. But teaching your students how to score study and how to listen and analyze like a composer awakens them to the art within that music. It's not just these notes on a page, And like I said, we're trying to build personal, engaging, insightful experiences with all the different learning objectives. You bring Michael Standard into your classroom on the Common Time platform. Of course, I said he's an expert at 20th century music. He can also talk about composition in general and help your students with the composition aspect of the IGCSE, which we haven't gotten to yet. And he is also a master of writing chamber music. So when you're teaching your students 20th century music, you're talking about the Perrault ensemble. He can speak about that from personal experience, from what he's done as a composer, what he's done working with different musicians, what he's done in his own personal life that connects to this curriculum. And that brings me to another point that I'm actually using my phone here to read through my notes, and I'm trying to turn off the auto brightness and the auto lock because my phone keeps turning off. Do y'all ever have that problem where you're trying to read something and your phone just keeps locking and turning off? So let me see. I think I go to General and I will go to. How can I turn this off? Not accessibility. I used to be so much better at operating the settings of iPhones, but it's like, every time you update it, it changes, and you can never keep up with it. So I'm in my general. Okay, I guess I'm just gonna have to put up with it and keep it refreshed. So if you see me looking to the side or you see me kind of diddling my fingers over this way, it's because I'm trying to auto lock 30 seconds, but it's not allowing me to do it. Maybe it's because I'm in battery saver mode. So let's go to battery. Let's turn off low power mode. Now let's go and let's turn off auto lock to never. Got it. Thank you for your help and support. Michael Standard, helping your students think like a composer when they're analyzing and listening. So those are the two ways that Common Time can help your students with the listening portion of the exam, is by helping them think like a conductor and think like a composer. Lucky for you, there are several composers on the Common Time platform, and there are multiple conductors slash band directors slash orchestra directors slash choral directors on the program as well that can help your students analyze this music and listen to it from a new perspective, drawing a deep connection between what they're seeing on the page and what they're going to be hearing on those recordings. Part 2 of the listening section of the exam is world music. The students are going to be asked to identify the culture, genre, and instruments, like the country, the location of a set of music. The world's huge, so the IGCSE has done us a favor by generalizing the types of music that they will randomly ask you about. They can ask you about Latin American music, African / Arab music. They rope those in together. So it's really two things, right? Chinese music, Indian music, Japanese music, and Indonesian gamelan music. So, in theory, they could pull recordings, score examples, what is this instrument, what country does this come from, rhythms, vocabulary, from any one of those 6 areas. To me, that sounds wild, because people get PhDs and DMAs focusing on just Latin American music. Yet, we're asking our students in 2 years to have an overview of all of them, and they're like jack of all trades, master of none, but I digress. I'm about helping you right now. I said this before, when you're covering that much material, the best way to help your students internalize that much varied information is by providing them with a deep, insightful, engaging experience that is tied to those learning objectives. It's the only way. It's the only way. You've got to remember, they're talking about tabla. I remember this experience. They're gonna need that because it's too much. The IB has actually done away with this portion of the exam and made it all portfolio, where now they're just doing the composition. They're doing the musical links investigation, where you have to write essentially a research paper comparing two non-similar types of music. Like you might compare bluegrass music and kabuki theater, and you do a musical links investigation to find similarities, differences. There's research involved. It's kind of like the extended essay. But that's an IB. However, the IGCSE is still doing the exam, so you've got to prepare them for it, and Common Time's here to help you. Providing your students with a memorable experience to connect to that learning experience, something personal, something they can remember, is by bringing in a guest artist to put a face, to put a personality, to put a live virtual experience with those. Let me tell you how Common Time is going to help you do that after you sign up as an educator on our platform right now. Number one, Latin music. It's often defined by their rhythm. A lot of the different genres of Latin music, like the rumba, the samba, the merengue, all of the tango, those are also the names of rhythms. So Latin music is, to me, defined more by its rhythm than its melody or its bass line. How do you create a personal experience with rhythm? You bring in a drummer, and on Common Time, we've got a lot of them. Two I want to highlight right now are myself. If you see my artist profile on the Common Time platform, once you sign up as an educator, you will see that I actually offer a Latin and West African hand drumming improvisation workshop where your students and we go through several different rhythms from those cultures. Then we learn about how to use the musical elements to alter them and improvise with them, and then we played the musical game Cobra by John Zorn to kind of inspire improvisation within the students. When your students are sitting for that exam and that unprepared world music question asks them about the clave rhythm, they're going to remember that experience that they had with me so much more than they're going to remember reading about it and listening to it once in a textbook. Secondly, I'm bringing the hand drumming experience. Another part of contemporary Latin music is drum set. There's also drum set rhythms that go along with all of these genres, and we've got an international touring drummer, Jordan Manley, who can come into your classrooms on the Common Time platform with his drum set. He can share his screen and actually break these rhythms down, teaching your students how to listen for the bass drum. Teaching them how to pick apart these rhythms that they're going to hear in these recordings and building a personal experience for them that they can call on when they're in this stressful exam, because they're going to remember Jordan and his personality before they remember chapter 26 of your world music textbook. Aren't we doing away with that term, world music? I mean, there's a lot of talk about that. What is classical music? What is classical music? And especially when you realize that a lot of cultures existed before the Western canon began. By the time the Gregorian chant came around, were they not already drumming and singing and dancing in West Africa? Were they not already playing the erhu or the guzheng in China? Yet they get the classical. Okay, we could be here all day. The second area of expertise your students will need is African and Arabian music. This was not taught to me at all in my world music class. We did Latin, we did Irish, we did Japanese, and then we did my professor's specialty, which are the people of... Oh my goodness, Dr. Green is going to kill me for not remembering this. The Guarana people. It's where they're in Belize, I think, and I think he has that in his blood, which is why he was kind of one of the first PhDs that really focused on that area. So I think a lot of the text on their culture is from him, which is really cool. You got to write your folks' history down. But those are the cultures we needed. None of them are on this exam except for Latin American music. So with the African and the music from Arabia, I think that is also rhythm based, but it's also very region specific, which makes it even deeper. And it has a lot of unique instruments that are specific to these regions. Once again, when you're covering that much content, you need a personal You need a personal experience for your students. You need a face and a name behind these learning objectives. We've got two for you right here. More than two, but I'm going to tell you about two. Number one, we've got Farzin. He is Persian. He is a master of the oud, which is like the Arabian lute, and also the kamanche, which is a stringed instrument as well. Imagine when you do your unit on Arabic music, you bring him in to actually teach a little Arabic, to actually go through some of this folk music right in front of you playing it, to actually break down some of the different instruments of the culture and share them with them personally. Me and you, not me in this textbook. That is an invaluable experience that your students are going to be able to reach back and call on when it's needed. Yeah. The second person I wanted to talk to you today for how Common Time can help support you and your students when they're going through the IGCSE curriculum is, well, no, that was the person. I'm reading down my list too far. I got ahead of myself. Farzin, he is on the Common Time platform right now, available to be booked by you educators to come and give your students the experience of Arabic music from someone who actually breathes that culture. We're all about building personal connection. You hear those words, constructivism. If you've been in an education master's recently or even an undergrad, you know that term constructivism. What better way to construct meaning than by actually meeting with those real life people? That's the reason that schools do Career Day, so that students can construct meaning and put a face behind these careers. That's the reason that Christine started Common Time Online. It's so students could put a face and a name behind the art they're learning. I asked a question in an earlier webinar. How many of you are you the only musician your students know personally? That's not good, because when it comes to being a doctor, your student probably knows 10 doctors, whether they go to those doctors frequently, whether their mom's friend is a doctor, whether they're, you know what I'm saying? Like when it comes to being in the Army, in the States, everyone knows someone who's in the Army, but not everyone knows a professional musician. And that's, I think, why a lot of our students don't pursue careers in the arts, and they don't see the true value behind building a career that's based on the arts, because they just don't see it. You know, we see basketball players on TV every single day for 9 months of the year. And we wonder why everyone, at least in my community, a lot of people want to be ball players. But we don't see professional musicians in that same light. You know, we get to see ball players over a process. We get to see them at the beginning of the season and the end. But we just see this unattainable final product from professional musicians, especially in popular music, that I think is why a lot of students don't pursue art seriously as a career, whether academically or work-wise, and Common Time's there to fix that by helping support your students when they learn Arabic music and African music from Farzin, our Arabic music expert, who can actually bring in instruments, sing the song, play the instruments, do the dances, and give your students a real-world connection beyond the pages of that textbook. Chinese music. I actually lived in China, and I had the opportunity to play in a Chinese percussion ensemble, which was really cool. I saw them outside of an electronics mall, and they had drums and gongs and cymbals. And the first time I saw them, I just watched nervously. And my Chinese was very bad. It's still very bad. The second time I saw them, I actually got up the courage I walked up to the guy, I showed him some pictures of me playing the drums. I'm a percussionist. I probably got some drumsticks somewhere. See? I showed him some pictures of me playing drums, and I was trying to say, like, I can play, like, can I play with you? And he said, of course, like, yeah, they're kind of enamored by Westerners. I think they think we're cute. Like when you're in some noodle shop slurping noodles and eating dumplings, they look like, oh, look at that American trying to use chopsticks. I think they kind of look at it like that, like it's cute. So of course they're like, yes, yes, please play with us. And then I realized they weren't reading Western notation. They were reading this kind of, I really don't remember what it's like now. I've got pictures of it in my phone somewhere. But it was like X's and O's and like squares and stuff. So I just watched for a few minutes, and that's why I'm glad in my master's program we were really big on new music and recording new music and commissions. So I'm kind of used to symbols that don't exist. So I just watched for a minute and I go, okay, I was playing Gone. So I was like, okay, he's muffle hitting on this. He's like releasing it because there was, if I remember correctly, they were holding it, but there was also like a strap, so they were able to like muffle and not muffle it. So I was like, okay, he's muffling on these, he's muting on, he's not playing on these, like these are rest. He's letting it ring on these, and then I was like, the rhythm's moving like this, and that's how it goes. I messed up a couple times, but within 10, 15 minutes, I was getting in there, and it was great. I'll never forget that experience. I'll never forget what a guzheng is. I'll never forget the sound of those Chinese toms. I'll never forget what an erhu is. I'll never forget what a pipa is. I'll never forget that experience, and that's because it was real. There was a face behind it. I can still see that guy's face. He had on glasses. I never knew his name. He probably told me his name, but he could have said, "Do you want $1 million?" And I would not have known because my Chinese was really bad. But that's what you've got to give your students. If they give me a test on Chinese music right now, even years after that experience, I probably will fail. But I will at least be confident, even if the confidence is misguided, because I know I can call on that experience to bring that knowledge back out of me. You give your students an experience like that, coupled with the fact that they actually studied the music, they're unbeatable. They're indestructible. Here's how Common Time is going to do that with two amazing guest artists. Number one, we've got Brenda Poon, who is from Hong Kong. Not only does she know the traditional Chinese music, she also speaks Mandarin and Cantonese to assist with vocabulary. She knows about all these instruments, and she's a classical percussionist. So playing the Chinese tom, there's little ones and like thin little ones that are played with like chopstick kind of sticks, and there's also larger ones. She can actually show you these instruments. She can tell you about them. She can give you personal experiences with those types of ensembles. The ensemble is usually like these people stomping on the ground, and erhu singers, percussionists, and a guzheng, and they like sing songs and play the music and like stomp on the ground and like drink and stuff. Yeah, they came to my school once and did it, and I also saw a group on a street corner one time, and smoke cigarettes. That's what they did. And I'm telling you this from experience. Brenda Poon can come in and put a face and a name behind the rhythms, behind the words, behind the tradition. She also brings that classical percussion element and can help her students with the final part, which is the performance element. Next, we have Carrie Lowe, who is a classical guitarist. So she can tell you about pipa. She can tell you about erhu. She can help you with the Mandarin vocabulary, putting a face and a name behind these experiences. The next way Common Time can help is with the Indian music section. We have Pranoy from Calcutta, India. He is a tabla master. Imagine having someone actually workshop the ragas with you instead of just reading about it. Imagine having someone teach some basic tabla to give your students an actual hands-on experience with the genre. That personal experience with a face and a name, coupled with the text that you're going to be reading, I think is the best way to prepare your students, not only for this exam, but to prepare them to appreciate music from different cultures. One of the things I was talking to my wife about is when I moved to Dubai, I met Syrian people. I met an Iraqi person. There's Afghani restaurants here. If you are an American like me, you understand how wild that is to meet a Syrian person. Because as far as the media has taught me, those people don't exist. And the ones that do exist are not shown positively. As far as what I knew as an American, the Iraqi people just were not real to me. So to actually meet these people and realize these are normal humans living their life was almost emotional for me, and it made me realize the level of programming that I have gone through. If the goal of your curriculum is to build international minded, culturally literate, global citizens, you have got to be using Common Time to bring these people into your classrooms. You prepared your students for the Indian section of the listening exam. Do your students know any Indian musicians? Hey, it's okay. If not, sign up for Common Time right there. Bring Pranoy in. Have him workshop the ragas with you. Have him share your screen and show you some of these ragas and then go through them with his hands of fire. The other two sections of this that Common Time cannot currently assist you with are Japanese. We don't have any Japanese experts on the platform currently, and also the Indian gamelan, not Indian, Indonesian gamelan music. Um, to my knowledge, we don't have any artists that specify in those particular areas now, but the ways that Common Time can help you with your curriculum is by bringing in a live person, a face and a name to really, really help drive a connection between your learning objectives and what the students are going to need to know and the experiences that they're having. So that's all for the listening portion of this exam. Let's get on to the composition part. Your students are going to be asked to compose two different pieces. They can be for any instrument or collection of instruments. One of which has to be notated in standard Western notation. The second one can be notated in anything that makes sense for the instrument. And they're going to be grading you on notation. Does your score look neat and clean? They're going to be grading you on the ideas, like is the music good? They're also going to be grading you on mastery of the medium. So are you writing the correct ranges for flute? Are you using the pedals on the piano? Are you are you writing the correct ranges on percussion instruments? Do you know about these instruments and do you know how to properly use them? Do you have them playing things that are idiomatic for the instrument? Do you have the clarinet making sounds that are characteristic clarinet sounds, for example? They're going to be grading you on things like that. We have to get our students to compose like composers, not like music students. When I first took music theory in high school, of course, we started with the chorales and then we learned how to write chord progressions or we learned how to harmonize a melody. And I was kind of thinking of it like, this is our melody, this note is do, so I'm going to use a 1 or a 6 chord here. I was kind of composing like a scientist. I wasn't really composing, but the person who taught me my music theory initially was more of an arranger and a music theory guy. So he was teaching me how to harmonize a melody, but he wasn't teaching me composition. He was teaching me how to arrange, but he wasn't teaching me composition. I have to do more research on this. I know in the IBDP you can submit an arrangement. They actually ask you to submit 3 compositions. I think 1 can be an arrangement. I'm not sure the IGCSE standpoint on this because frankly I don't teach it. I've done kind of the research we need to do for this webinar. But let me show you how Common Time can support your composers. Number one, we've got Brett Copeland, who's available now to come in as a guest artist to your class. He's a master of the chamber ensemble. He's a 21st century composer. He's a master of electronics. He's a master of recording. Your students have to record these pieces, and the listeners can only grade what they hear, meaning your recording has to be of some quality. They're not asking you to go to the studio and get it mixed and mastered by Kanye, but it's got to be of some quality. He's self-published, so he's an expert on notation and formatting. He's written for orchestra, and he's a brass specialist. So you bring in Brett Copeland, he can workshop some of his own pieces and take you. The reason I love the chamber composers is because you could throw 4 instruments at him, and he'll give you a 10-minute work. A lot of these IGCSE and the IBDP classes are kind of mixed match. You've got a guitar player, a drummer, a singer. Well, that doesn't sound mixed match. You might have a flute player, a piano player, a harp player, a bass player, a violinist, and a trumpet player. Brett Copeland's going to teach you how to take those sounds and make that into a homogeneous chamber piece, because I've seen him do it. He's going to teach you how to incorporate electronics into your music. He's going to teach you some recording techniques to make sure that you give the graders something that they can listen to. He's going to make sure you know the full limitations of brass instruments, including extended techniques. What better way to max out the mastery of the medium portion of their composition grade by using extended techniques? If you put multiphonics in a piece of music, the graders are going to be over the moon that your students have that type of technical mastery over composing for these instruments. Brett Copeland's ready to get into your classroom and do this now. He's ready to workshop some of his compositions, show you the compositional process when he goes from sketches and phrases to these fully orchestrated pieces. He's going to be able to show you how to take the instruments available in your classrooms right now and combine them into a piece. He's going to show you how to record your music in a way that makes sense. And he's going to make sure that you know the full limitations of brass. And he's going to show you how he self-publishes. He's going to show you how to notate and format these pieces in a way that's going to make sense to the graders. I imagine oftentimes when they're grading on notation, your recording and your score got to line up. And I feel like a lot of times with students and young composers, the way that they notate and format their pieces, there's a disjunct there, and that's probably the easiest way that the graders are able to see that your score is not up to snuff. Second composer that you can bring in to put a face and a name behind these learning objectives is Michael Standard. Same guy from before. He's a percussion expert. He can show your students all the different possibilities and sounds that can be made by percussion. He also self-publishes, so he can show you his perspective on notating, his perspective on editing, his perspective on making sure that your music is clear and easy to read. He's also an audio engineer, so he can show you his technique for making sure your pieces get recorded properly. And once again, he can workshop his own work. In Common Time, we love active artists. He can show you his own pieces of music and show you how he went from beginning to end and help your students define their compositional practice. Douglas Hine is another composer on our platform. He has composed a lot for guitar. I feel like in the IBDP and the IGCSE, which we're breaking down today, and especially in IGCSE schools, ensembles are not common during the day. So their music courses are classroom music mostly, not choir or orchestra. So when you get to the IGCSE, you're going to get a lot of students who are maybe just taking private lessons. You're not going to get a lot of trumpet, a lot of flute. You're going to get a lot of voice, a lot of guitar, a lot of drums. You'll get some of those instruments too. You will, but you're going to get a lot of those instruments as well, since the music class is more open. It doesn't have that ensemble requirement. The guitar player is not in band, right? So Douglas is so cool because he's composed and been published a lot for guitar. So he can actually help your students take those riffs and those improvisations and get that notated. Not only get it notated properly, but expand that riff into a full piece that can be presented to the examiners. And last, Lionel Cohen. He is a pretty big film composer, and he is a master of the genres of rock and pop. So he can actually help your students get together and compose music that they like. You know, he can help them compose rock and pop music using the instruments that they have available in their classes so that they can record it. He also is a big music producer, so he can help with the the electronic, the digital aspect as well. And as a film composer, I like him. I would like to see him do a session on connecting emotion or feelings to works of music. Because when your students are sketching their pieces, you know, they may have a melody or they may just start with a feeling. Like, I feel anxious coming out of the pandemic. Lionel can help them take anxiety. That's like when you're looking at a movie and he says, okay, George Clooney is scared right now. That's all he's starting with. And sometimes that's all your students are going to be able to start with is how they feel. And teenagers feel everything all the time a lot. So I'm sure there will be a wealth of feelings for them to be able to draw from. And Lionel can help your students achieve that. He can help your students achieve that. Give me one moment. And those are some of the ways that Common Time can help you provide a face-to-face personal experience with your students to exceed on the expectations on the composition part. The final part of the IGCSE curriculum is the performance aspect. You've got to submit 2 performances. I think improvisations are accepted, and they're going to be grading you on musicality, intonation, tone quality, things like that. They're going to be grading you on your technical ability. They're going to be grading you on phrasing. I said musicality. If you're improvising, they'll grade the ideas, things like that. It's like your standard music performance grading, like how people evaluate music performance. I think some of the best ways to foster inspiration for performance in your students is number one, by private lessons, and number two, by a masterclass series. When I was in university, I think the masterclass series of instruments that weren't mine was some of the most musical learning that I was able to get. Just hearing artistry for artistry's sake, not having to think of, oh, that guy's not using rubber mallets on rebounds. Like, what's going on? Just hearing somebody make music was able to inspire me so often. And I want to recommend some artists for you that could both be part of a rotating masterclass series to keep your students inspired, to keep them hearing good music. You've got to hear good music oftentimes to make good music. And how often are your students going and hearing live classical music or pop music performances? That could be a part of their curriculum. So I want to highlight some artists that could come in and give master classes or recitals and also private lessons with your students. Number one is Joshua Alexander. He's a trained vocal coach and educator in the Atlanta area and also a composer. Oftentimes in these DP and IGCSE, like classroom music type classes, we get a lot of people that are singers. But a good shower singer does not always command the highest score when it's time for evaluation because, like I told you, musicality and feeling is only part of the score. They're looking for technical prowess as a big chunk of that. Joshua Alexander can come in, and make sure that your students are technically sound and make sure that they're doing what singers do. He can teach them the warm-ups. He can teach them the exercises. He can teach them the maintenance on their throat. He can go through their diction and making sure that if they're singing in German that they're doing their pronunciation correctly. If they're singing in English even, oftentimes Maybe it's different in the UK, but oftentimes Americans are the worst at speaking English, the worst at pronunciation. There's so many different dialects and slang and pronunciations. He can make sure that your students' diction is on point and making sure that they are technically sound in using their voice. Quentin Mallett, who has over 10 years of teaching and adjudicating percussion at all levels, can make sure that your drummers are not just solid, maybe if they're coming from a drum set perspective, but also that they have the musicality and the little technical detail that the graders are going to be working or waiting for and listening for. If you got classical percussionists, he can work with them to make sure that their technique is actually supporting what they're playing and not hindering them. And he can also give a lecture recitals and just perform and speak about technique to your students to keep them continuously inspired. We have Cassandra Ormsby, who is our double reed expert. She could come in and make sure your students have reeds that are ready for their recordings. She can come in and perform bassoon and contrabassoon works to keep your students inspired. She can give private lessons because her knowledge and expertise on double reeds is way beyond mine and probably yours. So she would be great for private lessons on that aspect. Likewise, she teaches at the university level. So she is preparing people for auditions and for those next level professional auditions. We have to remember that the IGCSE, in my opinion, is not just a curriculum or an exam, it's a practice career. Because if you're practicing listening, you're practicing performing, you're practicing composing, you're practicing, in my mind, conducting, composing, performing, producing, that's part of listening, playlist creation, radio careers. You're practicing working in music. She's preparing people to work in music. Why not have her prepare your students? Next, we've got Brett Copeland, who I mentioned earlier, and Andrew Sally. They are both brass specialists that can come in. They can make sure you're playing with proper intonation, proper tone. They can fix your embouchure. They can make sure you're playing in the proper style with relation to those brass instruments. They are available now for private lessons and group lessons, and also master classes and just demonstrations to keep your students inspired and show them what good professionalism and what good performance on these instruments is like. Jordan Manley, who I mentioned to you before, is a worldwide drummer. He can show your drummers if they're doing a rock band for their ensemble. I think for the performance, part of it does have to be ensemble. If they're putting together a band, he can make sure they're tight and solid and tell them exactly what they need to be doing from the perspective of someone who's working in the biz right now, today. Likewise, he's also available for private lessons, which he's been giving on drum set for several years now, and make sure that your drummers are ready to perform up to their best self, their best standard, their best ability. We've got Michaela Tasselek, who is a violin and viola expert. She can make sure your string players are playing with the right style, the right technique, the right bones, the right articulation. She's also an avid performer, available for sessions, recitals, master classes, guest artist series. She's ready today. Just sign up right there on commentime.online and click the sign up button, making sure that your students are ready to be the best performers that they can be in the string area. We also have Diane Yu, who is of Korean descent but living in Germany. She's a piano harpsichord specialist that can come in, give her perspective on music and workshop pieces with your piano students, perform for them on a rotating basis, keeping them inspired, and also perform private and group lessons. And if you've got woodwind players that maybe aren't double reed, we've got myself and also Manny, who are band directors currently on the platform who can come in, and I've adjudicated before. I've sent bands to festival, so I can come in and adjudicate for intonation, musicality, tone quality, articulation, phrasing. I can come in, Manny can come in and adjudicate for these things and actually give a pre-evaluation to your ensembles or to your individual students to make sure that they're ready. So that was a long spiel. We'll be repurposing some of this text in the blog as well so that you can read it. Long story short, Common Time Online is here to support educators, empower artists, and expand arts outreach for organizations. Right now, I'm talking to educators about how we can support their students that sit for the IGCSE music exam. The way that we can do that the best is by providing a face-to-face learning experience to go along with all those learning objectives. Whether you're listening and analyzing, whether you're composing and notating, or whether you're performing and recording, we've got an artist that can come in and help you now. As always, reach me at michael@commontime.online in the email, Facebook at commontimeonline, Instagram at commontime.online, LinkedIn at commontimeonline. Thank you so much. Make sure that you're bringing in guest artists to supplement your learning. If you're not, you're doing your students a disservice, and we make that easier than ever with Common Time Online. Thank you.